you want to kill the lights on it, Dave, so I can see it? Broadly speaking, monsters and ghosts in Japan are known as yokai, and they fall into a number of different categories. I stumbled on them quite by accident. I love the old Japanese Godzilla movies of the 60s, 70s. But I was researching something totally different, and I stumbled quite by accident on a website about Japanese mythology. Found it completely fascinating. Found that no one had written a book in English about it, or one that had any kind of detail in. So I started to research it myself, and I've never ever enjoyed writing a book so much as this. So I was going to do about an hour's talk on this, but I've got to go through it in 15 minutes. So I'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of a few yokai, broadly ghosts, monsters, spirits in Japan. Can you go to the next one, please? There are a number of different varieties, and one of the varieties is called the sumogame, and they are inanimate objects that take on a life of their own. And it's believed that after 100 years, an inanimate object, something like a sandal or a bottle or an umbrella, could take on a life of its own, and the way it would act would be in line with how it was treated when it was an inanimate object. That one's called a kiyosame, and it's a sake jar that never runs dry. It's forever full of sake. The little face is made by cracks on the side. Can you go to the next one, please? That is karasa obeki, a ghostly umbrella. Japan is the only country in the world where you can have a phantom umbrella, and they're supposed to hang upside down like bats, and they have one big eye, and you can't see it on that one, but they also have a long tongue that comes down from underneath and licks you. So that's one class, is these strange inanimate objects which take on a life of their own. Next one, please, Dave. Oh, there's another one. That's a wanaguchi. Wanaguchi is a symbol from a temple. If it gets to 100 years old and it hasn't been treated well, it morphs into this crocodilian type monster with a symbol forming the head with great serrated jaws. Next one, please. Ghosts in Japan are very, very strange. Ghosts in Britain are generally thought to be fairly harmless, innocuous things. They might scare you, but they're not very dangerous. But Japanese ghosts tend to be very dangerous. This is a Yukai owner, the snow woman, and she's supposed to be the ghost of a woman who died either in childbirth in a snowstorm or was lost in a snowstorm and froze to death. And she's sort of a thermal vampire. Sometimes she appears in a long flowing white gown, sometimes she appears completely naked with only her hair and pubic hair showing against the white of the snow. We decided to go with illustrating her naked rather than in a robe, because we thought it would, it's a better thing to do. It's the more, it's closer to the original ideas of the Japanese, we thought. But she's a thermal vampire, and they're supposed to track down men during snowstorms and suck the heat out of them and leave them a frozen dead mass. Sometimes they will actually take the heat from the men by making love to them. Pretty good way to go, actually. You die with a smile on your face. Next one, please. Another form of yokai are human beings that are twisted or morphed beyond recognition, sometimes just a part of the body. Like this one, the Rakura Kubi. These are women. Usually they're women, for some strange reason. And Rakura Kubi has this psychic malady that at night, the head and neck take on a life of their own, that during the waking hours, the person can't remember, sort of Jekyll and Hyde affair. And the neck grows incredibly long like a python and goes slithering around the house. It can either just scare people, or in other accounts actually suck the life out of them and coil up in the rafter like a huge python. Next one, please. That's a Nure Ona, the snake woman. That's another sort of morphed human with a human head and a great long snake body. She was supposed to lurk by the sea and grab men and pull them into the water and devour them. Next one, please. This is yet another morphed human, Harry O'Connor. She has barbs in her hair, and the hair is actually motile and alive, and she once again will pose as a normal woman. And when a man gets close enough, the hair will all spring into Medusa-like life and strike at him with these little barbs. And the next one, Futakuchi owner. That's a really weird one. It's a woman who grows a mouth in the back of her skull that speaks and eats independently of her, and their hair acts like tentacles and will often devour all the food in the house. And they're thought to be women who starved their stepchildren to death, and so they're cursed with this second mouth and insatiable hunger. Next one, please. Now, in most cultures, the wolf is vilified, but in Japan, the wolf is thought of as a very noble animal. Unfortunately, it was, but it didn't stop them being hunted to extinction. And the Japanese werewolf, the Hito Okame, is a sort of inversion of the Western werewolf. It is a wolf that starts having the traits of a man, so it gets the cruelty and viciousness of a man, often from drinking poisoned water. So a mad wolf would have been thought of as a Hito Okame. And this is another class of yokai, are animals that behave in a strange way or can shapeshift. There. Can we have the next one, please? That is a raccoon dog, or tanuki as they call it in Japan. They're not related to true raccoons at all, they're an actual real canid. These ones have shape-shifting testicles, which they can use as weapons to bludgeon people with, or to trick them. And there's a famous story about one tanuki who transformed his testicles into a tea room in which two men were enjoying a cup of tea, and one of them inadvertently dropped some ash on the floor and scorched the poor tanuki, who then morphed back into his natural shape. The next one, please. That's a kitsune, or fox. And foxes were thought of as being evil shapeshifters, and after 100 years they would grow a second tail, and then after another 100 years a third tail, and so forth and so forth. And the most powerful ones were the ones with the most tails, and they could take on human form. Usually they took the form of woman. Regardless of the sex of the fox, they would take the form of a beautiful woman and cause all sorts of mischief. Next one, please. Now, my old favourite. Another class of Japanese monsters are monsters that have always been monsters. So they're not changed objects, they're not changed animals, they're not changed people. They have always been monsters. That is Mizuchi, a type of Japanese dragon, or Tatsu/Ryu. There's several names for the dragon in Japan. And the next one, please. There, that's another Tatsu attacking a pearl diver. They're generally thought to be benign, although Mizuchi was evil. Somewhat hot-tempered, slightly more aggressive than Chinese dragons, but far less so than Western dragons, and associated, like all Asian dragons, with water and rainfall rather than with fire. Quite possibly based on some form of animal we have no concept about, maybe some sort of marine reptile that today we would call a sea serpent, an elongated, scaly creature living in water. Certainly some of them are based on Indo-Pacific crocodiles, but some of them may be based on animals unknown to science. Next one, please. Kappa. This is one of the most famous of all the yokai. Outside of Japan, this is the one that's most known in the West. And the kappa has a tortoise-like face with a beak. Oh, it's just a battery for it. A tortoise-like face with a beak, and a tortoise-like body, and the arms and legs of a frog. It's very small, about the size of a 4-year-old boy, but it's immensely strong due to some liquid it keeps in a dip on its head. And it's quite strong enough to overpower a human being or even a horse. And they were famous for tearing the entrails out of the backside of their victims and eating them. And the way to thwart the kappa, because even though they're ferocious, they're very polite, because they're Japanese, is to bow to one of them. And if you bow to it, the magic liquid falls out of its depression on its head and it becomes as weak as a kitten. And you can also foil them with cucumbers, because they adore cucumbers. If you carve your initials in a cucumber and give it to a kappa, it will never attack you.